Having Jerry Gidel back to our program on Connected Farmer, and he's going to speak about if the U.S. can increase the corn and soybean exports on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So Jerry, how are you today? So do you think is there is room for the growth of soybean and corn exports?
Well, I think there's two sides to that situation. I think the beans are getting very shaky as to how much more the growth can be, partly because I think our main buyer over there in Asia, China, I think might be sitting here trying to figure out if they should be buying any more beans from the U.S. in February. They have quite a bit of sales on the books starting with March on out. Haven't we heard that Brazil has got 50 and 60% of their crops sold for next year, maybe higher from there. So I would expect that to be Chinese purchases already in the books. Now, the big question is, will they be able to get some sizable exports out in February? So I'm and the fact is, as you've been keeping account on this, I thought it was 10 days. Somebody told me it was 9 days since we've actually had a soybean sale announced. Now, that's probably not Chinese. It's probably unknown, but either one of them fits the bill from there. So that's kind of telling us that they're kind of taking a wait and see attitude on the soybeans. Corn, very interesting situation. I think the sales are potentially is there on our longer term basis, and that while the ones we had yesterday, they were a little down from what we have been seeing on a week by week basis here, 40 million and 50 million kind of things on both corn and beans. But we're like 52 and a half with the new revised number, because now that's a sizable jump we made here on the November crop report on exports of 325 million. The biggest problem about the corn side of things is that we need to get a big chunk of that moved to China and we're going to be running into some different type of delivery systems here as we start to see the Mississippi River barge systems start shutting down here in another 10 days, 2 weeks, and so then we'll just be dependent on Ohio River and some Illinois River shipments and that. So that really means we're going to be dealing with railroads, and 100-car unit trains can move some stuff, but the weather can always have a factor in that, and that's the factor that I think we're looking at when we look at the shipments. We'd have to right now, by my calculations, you have to see about 50 million a week here in shipments. That's a pretty hefty standard on over let's just say a 9-month period of time here, and that to get to that number. So we have to have some numbers higher than 50 to make that average. So it's going to be an interesting situation on the corn side of things. Boy, we made a big change already in demand, though, from just barely getting 1.75 million corn supposedly being sold overseas, and now we're talking about over 2.6 billion bushels, I should say. That's a big change, and it's positive, but I guess I'm in a tentative period right here as we go into the U.S. holidays and also looking at the weather situation as we go into South America over the next 6 to 8 weeks, because we're getting things planted. I'm not sure we're getting great growth, but we're getting planted. So now we got to figure out how it looks once it gets further along here in the growing season in South America.
I was going to say that you can be surprised if the South American crop is a lot smaller, and maybe Brazil could import a lot from the United States.
Well, that is a nice, interesting scenario. We do have a little issue going on here of previous sales in an old crop, in essence, your old crop down in South America, and that in our there is a possibility that we could see some beans moving that way. Corn's a little more interesting, but that could be maybe directed towards Argentina shipments there. But in general, the soybean side, that could pick us up a little bit here on that side of things. Clearly, this year's growing season in the northern part of Brazil has been quite different than they expected. Actually, somebody calculated that between September 1st and November 15th, we're at the lowest average moisture situation for the last 4 decades. Now that's a significant factor, and that might end up being a huge factor here on what happens with the beans. The biggest problem in that, unfortunately, right now, you can't really judge soybeans when they're in the bin, or excuse me, in the bag, or just in the ground, and you can't see them. That's the big feature as to how damaging it is at this point. I think it's something to be recognized and that kind of stuff. But we've also had the impact of that might not come until we get after the first of the year. And somewhere, if you don't have good information to keep the bull going every day, you got to feed it. And if it doesn't happen with less rains or other issues in that, it kind of wants to back up a little bit here. And I think that's exactly what happened even today, where we tried to buzz up against the recent highs, and we just didn't get excited about moving above them today, and rightly so. Fridays are always a treacherous day in the world of commodity pricing.
Those those rallies on soybeans surprised you?
Not at this time of year they don't, but what's surprising me is that I thought we had a chance to really push that above $12 here in this time period, and we haven't. And that on the soybeans, the corn side, I know that 1.7 billion carryover stock is significantly less than where we started last spring, but it's not into the point where we are down really probably in the 1.2, 1.3 billion number. Considering our demand is really where we're going to put our stocks to use ratio pretty tight. So there's some room in that. The thing is, I'm not sure we can get it in exports in the U.S. Unless we have more damaging weather around the world. And unfortunately, on the corn side, we really won't get a great sense of that until, I would have to say late February, March, when will they get the harvest done on soybeans, so we can put in those second crop safrinha corn in the northern hemisphere, and that's a long ways away. And so that's another reason why I'm a little cautious about where we're at here short term on prices. Not to say that there's plenty of opportunities here, but unfortunately, when you don't have something right on the doorstep of enthusiasm, it's something that's two months away, it doesn't have the impact on keeping the price up. It's the old game of what have you done for me recently, and that's surprisingly strong in the commodity markets. Longer term, there's lots of uncertainties here, and there's a lot of potential in that. But I just have to say that this is not a time where maybe an opportunity to step off the escalator a little bit, take some profits, put some money in the bank, and then move on to what can happen over the next 6 or 8 weeks.
So you don't think that it's time to think about $13 a bushel for soybeans?
Yes, soybeans. Yes, that we bumped up to this 1185 to 1190 scenario, and here and on through early next week, any kind of rally bounce or that, I'd just be going ahead and taking advantage of it. From there, I'm suggesting to my clients here in the U.S. to look at a 20% kind of 25%, up around 65% sold on soybeans and corn at this point, because we still have plenty of uncertainty, but we also have plenty of maybe lack of enthusiasm here after the big pushes we've had in these markets. And so that's I think marketing is always difficult. People always think there might be a nickel around the corner. But if you don't have some sales in the bank, it's hard to wait for that. No one can pick the top, not even me. I'll guarantee you that. And you and I have been in this game long enough. We don't need to try to figure out that we know exactly where the top's going to be, because we don't know that until it's 6 months later, type situation. And that's the same thing about new crop. This is not a bad place to get 10% sold out there for next year's harvest. Don't have to worry about storage, that kind of stuff. I'll guarantee you the prices now than where they were back in March through May. A lot better to put that on your balance sheet out there for funds, selling soybeans and corn just to get started, to have some kind of value, and you don't have to worry about drying it down and storages and all that kind of stuff. I think those are, at least marketing wise, is a good one. As I said, 10% is, I'm not out there selling the whole crop. Let's don't get crazy here that I think that the market's going to have no chance for rallies in the next year. But at the same time, when it's always easier to average up than it is to average down. Averaging down is no fun.
And how did you see the ethanol exports for this week, considering that we are in a very complicated scenario with COVID spikes around the U.S.?
Oh, definitely complicated. We slipped a little bit on the weekly rate, but interestingly enough, in that corn demand structure, and I think that's the interesting part of it, the domestic corn demand situation, and also even maybe some feed demand situations in that could end up being helpful to the corn prices, in that, right at this point, everyone's been very, very cautious, and rightly so, that our driving demand in the U.S. was going to take a hit here with this second wave or third wave or whatever wave we're in, and rightly so. There's some caution right there. I kind of feel like those I mentioned, I think not last week, the week before, when we had the first notification from ADM that there was some sales of ethanol or ships of ethanol was going to China. I kind of feel like that's still in the background. I sure haven't heard a lot of noise about it recently, but I think that's part of the reason why we're hanging in here on actual production at the plants right now, that they must have some previous orders that they're going to be able to ship here to compensate for maybe a reduced driving demand. That means reduced ethanol blending into the U.S. Now, the other interesting twist on this, too, on a longer term basis, if the ethanol world is in the green world, it's not as green as wind and solar and stuff like that. But I would sense that with the Democratic potential leadership in the White House here, there's going to be a more positive situation there, and I think that's going to be potentially maybe a little more forceful here to get this 15% blend into the system, because the key to this whole thing is we got to get money out there for the retail gas stations to convert over to be able to produce 15%. And right now, there's been no incentive from the current administration to do that because they're tied into the oil industry's demand in that. But right now, at least, they don't look like that they're going to be able to give away all these waivers like they did the last couple years. So that's a positive for ethanol, too.
So what you expect for the coming week?
Well, I kind of feel like we're still going to be a little choppy at having some attempts to get there between now and Tuesday. Wednesday is always a difficult time, and Friday can really be a crapshoot. We've had many kind of down days, up days. I'd have to say, considering the general ideas of what we're dealing with here this year, with so many funds and the speculative link that we've got in these corn and soybeans wheat markets, and that, I'd have to be a little gun shy that this Friday after Thanksgiving, that has been potentially a positive day for prices, might not be all that positive. I think there's going to be more people deciding after Tuesday that they're putting their stop in the market and all of a sudden they're coming back on Monday, Tuesday. And so that could be vulnerable to the local slash computer traders that are starting to generate exciting. They like to nose around and see if there's any stops in the market, and that's to me is a little dangerous. And another reason why I guess I'm willing to be a little bit of a seller here this week or over the weekend, early next week, take advantage of these prices and not have to deal with what could happen on the day after Thanksgiving. At this point, I'll be around though. We can sure talk about the markets after the on that Friday afternoon. So I'm looking forward to that, Louis.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. I'll see you then.
You bet.